This happened a long time ago, but it's something I still think about every now and then. I've never liked camping, not even a little. I'm just not built for it. The dirt gets everywhere, bugs seem to treat you like a buffet, and no matter how expensive the sleeping bag is, it always feels like you're lying on a slab of concrete by the time morning rolls around. Unfortunately, my dislike for camping never stopped me from being dragged along on countless trips. None of those trips were ever my idea. My dad, on the other hand, absolutely loved it. He was one of those rough, outdoorsy types who believed that spending time in the wilderness built character. Every summer when I was growing up, he would haul me out into the woods with his equally rugged friends. The goal, according to him, was to disconnect from technology and reconnect with nature. For me, it just meant being uncomfortable for several days straight.
By the time I reached my sophomore year of high school, I was done suffering quietly. I finally worked up the nerve to ask him if I could bring a friend along. I figured having someone my own age would at least make the trip bearable. To my surprise, he didn't put up much of a fight and agreed almost immediately. I decided to bring my friend Charles from school. On paper, this sounded like a bad idea. Charles had been a hardcore Boy Scout back in the day and genuinely loved camping. But despite that, he wasn't insufferable about it. He teased me for hating the outdoors, sure, but he wasn't the type to act like you weren't a real man if you didn't enjoy sleeping in the dirt. Plus, if I had to be out there, I figured it was better to be stuck with someone who actually knew how to pitch a tent and start a fire without everything falling apart.
Charles was excited to come. Part of it was because he loved camping, but another part was that he was always looking for an excuse to get away from his parents. Unfortunately, things started going wrong almost immediately. One of my dad's friends had completely screwed up the campsite reservation. Instead of a quiet, isolated spot deep in the woods, we ended up at this awful, overdeveloped campground. There were indoor bathrooms, paved walkways, and even a playground for small kids. It barely felt like camping at all. It was more like an overgrown backyard with tents. My dad was livid, but somehow that wasn't even the worst part. A few hours after we arrived, we realized that right next to the campground was a mini amusement park. And I don't mean metaphorically, I mean a real amusement park. Carnival games, a Ferris wheel, and several roller coasters. It felt surreal, like two completely different worlds crashing into each other. A campsite and an amusement park were never supposed to exist side by side. Everyone was irritated. My dad and his friends complained non-stop about how this wasn't real camping. Charles joined in too, repeating the same jokes over and over. Eventually, it started getting on my nerves. As much as I hated camping, I still knew what it was supposed to look like. I finally snapped and told Charles to knock it off. And to his credit, he did. We had driven for hours to get there, so leaving wasn't an option. With no better choice, we decided to make the best of it. The adults sulked for a while before finally setting up camp. Charles, of course, stepped up like it was his moment to shine. Within minutes, the tent was perfectly set, every knot tight, the rain fly secure, stakes driven cleanly into the ground. Even my dad nodded in approval, which honestly annoyed me more than it should have. Charles and I were sharing a tent. After dinner, we slipped away under the excuse of organizing our stuff. In reality, Charles had brought along a small metal pipe and some weed hidden in an old tin. Nothing extreme, just enough to take the edge off. At that age, we were in that phase where doing something we weren't supposed to do felt exciting. We snuck into the woods, smoked, and laughed quietly to ourselves. Afterward, we went back to the tent and spent a few hours just talking about school and other friends. Eventually, we both realized we had way too much energy to sleep. Charles had this mischievous grin on his face, and I already knew what that meant. He suggested we explore the campsite. I wasn't interested until he clarified that he meant the amusement park.
That instantly changed things. He said it would probably be easy to climb one of the roller coasters. Back then, we loved climbing stuff, and the idea of scaling a roller coaster in the middle of the night was thrilling. Once we were sure everyone was asleep, we grabbed our flashlights and made our move.
It was well after midnight. We reached the fence surrounding the amusement park and realized it wasn't even difficult to climb. With a quick boost from Charles, we were over. Inside, the park was dark, but security guards were patrolling in golf carts. Every now and then, we could hear the hum of an engine as one passed nearby. It felt like we were sneaking through a stealth video game. We moved slowly, ducking behind buildings and keeping track of the patrol routes. At one point, we had to sprint across an open road to avoid being spotted. It was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. Eventually, we reached the base of one of the roller coasters. Up close, it looked massive. We spotted the maintenance stairs running alongside the track and didn't hesitate. The metal steps clanged softly under our feet as we climbed, trying not to make too much noise. Part of the way up, there were no railings at all, which made my stomach drop. When we finally reached the top, the view was incredible. We could see the entire park spread out below us. We took a single photo, then decided not to push our luck. If someone spotted us from below, there would have been no way to escape. On the way back, things felt faster, almost too easy. Maybe the patrols had slowed down, I don't know. We were only a few minutes from the fence when we had to stop suddenly. A security guard was approaching in a golf cart. We ducked behind a snack stand and waited. That's when I noticed movement in the darkness. At first, I thought it was just a shadow. Then Charles tapped my arm and pointed. About 30 feet away, between two buildings, was another person. They were crouched low, just like us, clearly trying to avoid the guards. It didn't look like a kid, and the worst part was that I was pretty sure they were looking directly at us. My heart was pounding. We couldn't move. The guards still hadn't passed. Then the figure darted across an open patch of ground, briefly illuminated by a streetlight. For a split second, I saw him clearly. It was a man. His clothes were torn, his posture awkward like he was injured, and smeared across his face was a dark liquid that looked unmistakably like blood. Charles saw it too. We exchanged a terrified glance. The man disappeared into the darkness. The guard finally passed, and we kept moving without saying a word. I checked over my shoulder constantly, convinced we were being followed. No one was there. We climbed the fence and dropped back into the campground. This time, there was no laughing. All we wanted was to get back to our tent. We lay awake for hours, trying to rationalize what we had seen. The only explanation we could come up with was that he was some homeless guy. It didn't feel right, but it was all we had. The next morning, everything seemed normal until a camp staff member made an announcement. A man had been stabbed and killed at a lake about 4 miles away. The suspect was still at large. The description matched the man we had seen perfectly. Charles and I said nothing. To this day, I regret that decision. It still scares me how close we were to something far worse. This happened back in October of 2016, right in the middle of that strange period when creepy clown sightings were all over the news. At the time, most people assumed it was just pranks or people looking for attention. I used to think that too, until this happened to me. I was 16 years old, a junior in high school. It was a regular weekday afternoon. I had just finished 7th period, said goodbye to a few friends, and headed toward the subway like I did almost every day. Nothing about the day felt off. It was completely routine. I boarded the train heading uptown. The car was mostly empty, which was a little unusual for that time of day, but not unheard of. I didn't think twice about it. I had my headphones in, music blasting at full volume. I think I was listening to Drake. On top of that, I was scrolling through chemistry flashcards on my phone, trying to study while I rode. Basically, I was doing everything you shouldn't do when traveling alone. I was completely unaware of my surroundings. But I knew the area well and had taken this route countless times, so I wasn't worried. I planned to get off at 96th Street and walk home like usual. The ride itself was uneventful. When the train slowed and pulled into the station, I stood up automatically. I barely even looked up to confirm where I was. Getting on and off that train had become muscle memory at that point.
I walked toward the doors with my head still down, music still blasting. The moment the doors slid open, I noticed something was blocking my path. At first, I only caught it out of the corner of my eye. I looked up and froze. A clown was standing directly in the doorway. Not someone wearing a subtle costume. This was a full-on clown outfit. Oversized rainbow-colored pants, a baggy yellow shirt held up by red suspenders, huge red shoes. His face was covered in thick white makeup with exaggerated features, bright red nose, blue eyebrows, an overdrawn smile. The only thing missing was the wig. He didn't say a word.
He wasn't trying to get on the train. He was just standing there, deliberately blocking me from getting off. For a second, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. I had never been that close to something so bizarre before. I stood there, completely frozen. Then reality kicked in. I only had a few seconds before the doors would close. I tried to move past him. The exact moment I brushed against him, he leaned down in one smooth motion, like he was making sure we were face to face. That snapped me out of it. I bolted. I sprinted past him and onto the platform. Almost immediately, I heard movement behind me. He lunged forward, trying to grab me. I barely managed to dodge him. Then he started chasing me. My heart was pounding out of my chest. The station was eerily quiet. There was no one else around. I glanced back and saw him coming after me, but the way he was running was wrong. His movements were jerky and unnatural, like his limbs didn't move the way they were supposed to. That's when I noticed what he was holding. In his hand was a knife. It looked like a kitchen knife. I don't know where he had been hiding it, and I didn't stop to think about why he had it. All I knew was that I needed to get away. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could, burst out of the station, and didn't stop until I was on the street. As soon as I felt even slightly safe, I flagged down police and told them what had just happened. Officers went down into the station almost immediately, but the clown was gone. It was like he had vanished. Even after talking to the police and being reassured that I was safe, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. For weeks afterward, I had this irrational fear that he somehow knew where I lived and would come back for me. Of course, that never happened. In fact, nothing else ever came of it at all. Still, I wouldn't be surprised if my story ended up lumped in with the other strange clown encounters from 2016. Most of them were fake, but I know what happened to me wasn't. It took me weeks to fully shake the fear, and even now, thinking back on it still makes my skin crawl.
This happened a couple of years after I finished my undergraduate degree. At the time, my life felt like it was stuck in limbo. I was technically enrolled in an online graduate certificate program at the same university where I had earned my bachelor's, but it didn't demand much of my attention. That left me with a lot of free time and not nearly enough money. During that period, I bounced from job to job, taking whatever I could find just to keep some cash coming in. Food delivery, odd gigs, short-term work, you name it. Indeed had basically become my homepage. I'd scroll through listings late at night, hoping something better would pop up.
Eventually, I got sick of driving around the same neighborhoods for minimum wage. I needed a change. One night, while browsing job listings, I came across something that immediately stood out. It was a private lifeguarding position at a hotel a few towns away. At first glance, it didn't seem that strange, but the more I read, the more confusing it became. The hours alone made no sense. Instead of normal pool hours, the shift was from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. during the week. It was essentially a night shift for a swimming pool. That wasn't even the weirdest part. The listing specifically requested applicants who did not speak Spanish. I read it twice just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. I'm half Mexican. I've spoken Spanish since I was a kid. On top of that, the town where the hotel was located was predominantly Spanish-speaking. The requirement didn't just feel strange, it felt deliberate. None of it added up. But then I saw the pay, $30 an hour. Back then, that kind of money felt unreal. I didn't care how strange the listing was. I told myself I'd just pretend I didn't speak Spanish. What were they gonna do? Quiz me? I applied that night. To my surprise, I heard back within a few hours and was invited to interview almost immediately. That should have been my first red flag, but I ignored it. On my first day, I pulled up to the hotel expecting something out of the ordinary. Instead, everything looked completely normal. A short, stocky guy came out to greet me. He was friendly, joked around, and immediately put me at ease. As we talked, I started to relax. Then another man appeared. He was taller, more serious looking, and the moment he approached, his demeanor felt different. He stared at me for a second before speaking to me, directly in Spanish. No greeting, no introduction, just casual conversation, like he was testing something. I instantly understood what he was doing. I gave him a blank look and didn't respond. Even though I understood every word, I acted completely clueless. After a few awkward seconds, he turned to the first guy. Then both of them burst out laughing like it had all been some big joke. The taller guy shook my hand and said he was just messing with me. I laughed along, but the feeling in my stomach didn't go away. They introduced themselves, Jefe and Esteban, and walked me through the complex toward the pool. Esteban, who clearly seemed to be in charge, explained the job. According to him, they wanted to extend pool hours to increase revenue and planned to start charging non-guests to use the pool.
I didn't know if that was even legal, but I wasn't about to question it. He explained that they preferred someone who didn't speak Spanish because it would discourage rowdy outsiders from harassing me. That explanation didn't really make sense, but I nodded and went along with it. My responsibilities were simple: lifeguard the pool, collect money from non-guests, call Jefe if there were any issues, and one more thing. If anyone showed me a blue wristband, I was to unlock a building behind the lifeguard stand, which they referred to as the pool house. I didn't ask questions. The first few weeks were uneventful. The pool was busier than I expected, but nothing seemed out of place. I collected money, watched swimmers, and did my job. No one showed me a wristband. About a month in, that changed.
One evening, a muscular Hispanic man wearing sunglasses and a white button-down shirt approached me. He didn't speak any English. He silently held up a blue wristband. I unlocked the pool house and watched him disappear inside. About an hour later, he came back out and left through the gate. The door locked automatically behind him. I noticed his backpack looked much fuller than when he arrived, but I brushed it off. Over the next few weeks, more people started showing up with wristbands. Sometimes they came alone, sometimes in groups. At the same time, more non-guests began using the pool. I started collecting far more money than before. Then something else happened. People began overpaying me by a lot. It wasn't occasional, It was consistent. I called Hefe to tell him something was wrong. He told me not to worry, said mistakes happened all the time, and hung up before I could say anything else. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just a pool job.
My mind went quiet, except for one thought I couldn't shake: money laundering. I considered quitting on the spot, but I had no proof, and $30 an hour was hard to walk away from, so I stayed. Once I started paying attention, everything made sense. The pool house was where the real business happened. Gambling, drugs, something worse. Whatever it was happening behind one locked door every night. People with wristbands started treating me like part of the operation. They learned my name, they tipped me, high-fived me, talked openly around me in Spanish, and I understood every word. A few days later, I had to jump in and rescue a child who had wandered into the deep end. It wasn't dramatic, but when I surfaced, people applauded. A man came down from the hotel and thanked me personally. That's when I realized the kid I saved was his son. The next day, I was greeted with wine, praise, and celebration. One man made a toast in Spanish about money, power, and destroying lives. Everyone laughed. That was when I realized how deep I'd gone.
The following day, my mom called me while I was on shift. She only ever called if it was important. She spoke only Spanish, so I answered her in Spanish and stepped into what I thought was a private corner. When I turned around, Esteban was standing there. He stared at me and asked how long I'd known Spanish. I lied. He didn't believe me. After a long pause, he said, "Okay," and walked away. A few minutes before my shift ended, he told me to arrive early the next day. He said he had a new opportunity for me. Then he tipped me hundreds of dollars. I never went back. For months afterward, I was paranoid. Every car slowed near my house scared me. Even now, I don't know why they needed me, but I know I was closer to something dangerous than I ever want to be again.